When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the government faced a crisis that reached into every American kitchen: how to feed a nation while also feeding an army of millions. The federal response produced one of the largest food control programs in U.S. history. In January 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8875, creating the Office of Price Administration. Its mission was clear: stabilize prices, prevent hoarding, and ensure that civilians and soldiers had enough to survive. The OPA would later write, "Food must be distributed fairly, so that no American goes hungry while our troops fight overseas." Millions of ration books were printed and distributed across the country. By March 1943, strict rationing was in effect for meat, sugar, butter, cheese, canned goods, and cooking oil. A system of red points and blue points determined what could be bought, documented in official OPA ration books number 2 and 3. Newspapers instructed families on how to stretch ingredients, while radio bulletins reminded citizens that food was a weapon in wartime. Historian Meg Jacobs notes that more than 8 billion ration stamps were issued during the conflict, reshaping American eating habits at a national scale. This was not only about scarcity, it was about control, logistics, and survival. At the same time, the War Food Administration collaborated with private industry to standardize food production. Uniform consizes, preservation methods, and packaging requirements emerged from necessity, not business ambition. The goal was to supply predictable, transportable meals for soldiers and war workers. The U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps developed the Saresha, and later the designed for mobility and caloric efficiency. In 1944, a quartermaster report stated rations must be simple, uniform, and capable of mass production. These principles would become foundational to the post-war fast food model. The impact extended beyond the battlefield. Conservation programs like Meatless Tuesdays and Wheatless Wednesdays encouraged Americans to change daily behavior. Housewives substituted beef with organ meats, and newspapers published government-approved recipes. Food companies adapted by producing more canned stews, dehydrated soups, and shelf-stable meals technologies advanced by wartime necessity. Clarence Birdseye's freezing innovations became pivotal as the government invested in cold storage transportation, according to food historian Andrew F. Smith. The wartime shift created a consumer expectation that meals could be prepared faster and stored longer. Restaurants near military bases simplified menus to accommodate ration limitations, serving affordable, quick items such as ground beef patties and fried potatoes. This was not yet fast food, but it was its blueprint. By the end of 1945, America had not only survived wartime shortages, it had unknowingly redefined its cuisine. When peace returned, the habits formed under rationing would fuel a new era of rapid service restaurants, standardized menus, and the rise of an industry that no government agency intended to invent. When millions of American service members were deployed across Europe and the Pacific, the military needed meals that could be transported, stored for months, and consumed quickly. This need reshaped the entire U.S. food supply chain. The Quartermaster Corps, working with the National Research Council and major food processors, perfected production methods for dehydrated soups, canned stews, powdered eggs, and compressed biscuits. In 1943, the Quartermaster Review described these efforts as the most extensive program of feeding an army in the history of the United States. Key innovations: standardized portioning, airtight packaging, and calorie-based meal planning would later influence civilian food service after the war. The Rationing, originally tested in 1942 for airborne troops and commandos, offered a portable, calorie-defined meal intended for short missions. Each box contained cheese, canned meat, biscuits, powdered beverage, sugar tablets, and a small pack of cigarettes. Its purpose was not taste, but efficiency and reliability, and troops quickly recognized its predictable structure. Historian Anastasia Marx D. Salcido notes that the rationing design represented one of the first large-scale applications of nutritional engineering in American food history. For millions of soldiers, eating became a mechanical act. Speed and energy replaced flavor and tradition. These same principles soon appeared in civilian cafeterias and factory lunchrooms supporting the war industry. Plants producing aircraft, tanks, and munitions adopted assembly-line food service, modeled after the same efficiency standards used to feed troops. Lunch counters reduced menus, accelerated service, and introduced pre-portioned items. Reports from the War Manpower Commission in 1944 emphasized that minimizing mealtimes increased industrial productivity. Speed was no longer just a convenience. It was a patriotic contribution to victory. Meanwhile, large food companies rapidly expanded their capabilities. Organizations such as Swift & Company, Armour, Hormel, and Bird's scaled up industrial meat processing, freezing, and packaging technologies through government contracts. Clarence Birdseye's freezing research, initially focused on fish, became crucial for ensuring food stability during long-distance transport. Refrigerated trucking systems, subsidized for military logistics, found postwar commercial uses, enabling restaurants to receive uniform ingredients regardless of region or season. This transportation breakthrough was essential to what would later allow fast food chains to replicate flavors nationwide. Civilian eating patterns changed as well. Gasoline and tire rationing reduced long-distance travel, shifting food consumption toward roadside diners near military facilities, rail hubs, and production centers. Many of these establishments served simple, high-turnover meals, such as ground beef patties, potatoes, and sweetened beverages that required fewer ration points. According to a 1945 food industry survey, short-ordered restaurants reported higher profitability when serving standardized menus, an early indicator of the economic model that fast food would adopt. By the end of 1945, America had unintentionally created a system in which meals could be produced faster, stored longer, and served with minimal variation. The logistical mindset that sustained troops and factory workers had seeped into everyday life. Soldiers returning home would soon expect the same speed and predictability they experienced during the war, setting the stage for a seismic transformation of American dining culture, one that was about to unfold far from the battlefields. When World War II ended in 1945, more than 16 million Americans had served in uniform, and their return permanently shifted the nation's food expectations. Many of them had spent years eating rations designed for maximum speed and caloric output. Meals were standardized, predictable, and portioned so precisely that soldiers could consume them in minutes. According to a 1946 U.S. Army subsistence report, the ration must fuel combat, not conversation. After the war, this utilitarian relationship with food followed veterans home. They remembered the efficiency, and while they did not miss the taste of ration cans, they recognized the value of meals that required little time or thought. Simultaneously, millions of war workers who supported the defense industry had eaten in large factory cafeterias that mirrored Army food systems. They were accustomed to streamlined menus and fast, industrial-style cooking. Wartime production had demonstrated that food could be prepared at scale, stored safely, and distributed with mathematical precision. The result was a new national mindset. Meals could be engineered. Historian Lizzie Cullingham explains that by 1945, the American diet had begun shifting from farm-based tradition towards scientific, industrial food management. This period also saw dramatic changes in household structure. The War Food Administration reported that in over 6 million American women were employed in war-related labor, an unprecedented shift in domestic life. With long shifts in factories and shipyards, families relied on canned stews, dehydrated soups, and frozen vegetables, products made practical by wartime logistics research and government coordination with private industry. Clarence Birdseye's freezing technology gained mainstream acceptance, and refrigerated trucks, developed in part for military supply, now delivered food across state lines. The components of fast food: uniform ingredients, long storage life, and rapid preparation were already in place. Beyond kitchens, cultural habits changed as well. Returning service members traveled more frequently, supported by the GI Bill and a growing highway system. Gasoline rationing ended, and automobile ownership surged. Roadside diners, once small and isolated, flourished along bus routes and trucking corridors. These establishments benefited directly from post-war surplus equipment, such as stainless steel cooking surfaces and temperature-controlled storage. A 1947 industry report noted that small restaurants serving ground beef patties, potatoes, and sweetened drinks saw the highest growth in daily turnover, an early indicator of the fast food model. At the same time, America's food research infrastructure remained intact. Wartime laboratory work on dehydration, emulsification, and fat stabilization led to new consumer products. Companies that had supplied the military Swift, Armor, General Foods, Hormel adapted their facilities for the civilian market. They introduced ready-to-cook meats, preformed patties, and standardized sauces, the same principles that would later allow restaurant chains to deliver identical meals nationwide. Scientific management had moved from the battlefield to the supermarket shelf. By 1948, U.S. newspapers began describing a new pattern in American dining. Families choosing quick-service meals over traditional home cooking. Journalists linked the shift to wartime habits, rationing fatigue, and the psychology of convenience. Soldiers had fought across 2 oceans, and the nation had supplied them with an unprecedented food system. Now, without intending to, the United States had built the foundation of a fast food society. The full transformation was not yet visible, but its momentum was unmistakable, and it would soon converge with new entrepreneurial experiments in roadside California. In the late 1940s, California became one of the most important testing grounds for a new model of American eating, one shaped not by culinary tradition, but by the logistical lessons of World War II. Population growth accelerated as returning veterans moved west, attracted by defense, aviation, and manufacturing jobs. Between 1940 and 1950, California's population rose from 6.9 to 10.6 million people, one of the fastest demographic shifts in U.S. history, with more automobiles, longer workdays, and reshaped household structures. Demand for meals that were quick, predictable, and inexpensive surged. The wartime rationing mentality, maximizing calories while minimizing time, had crossed into civilian life. During the war, commercial meat was regulated under OPA price ceilings, and ground beef became one of the most rationed and closely monitored products. After rationing officially ended in 1946, ground beef remained popular because it was affordable and easily portioned. This made the hamburger a practical food for restaurants attempting to serve large numbers of customers quickly. According to a 1947 USAID, post-war Americans increasingly preferred foods that were standard in preparation, economical in cost, and reliable in serving time. These are the same principles that guided wartime ration design. Small California roadside restaurants adopted production methods reminiscent of military mess operations and factory cafeterias. Kitchen spaces were reorganized into assembly line workflows, one station forming patties, another grilling, another packaging. The goal was not gourmet quality, it was speed and repetition. A National Restaurant Association report from 1948 noted a rising trend in limited menus built around beef patties served with potatoes or fried vegetable products. With minimal variation, training time for cooks dropped and consistency increased. For the first time, the American restaurant was beginning to resemble an industrial process. Standardization also extended to ingredients. Frozen and pre-cut potatoes, processed cheese, pre-sliced bread, and emulsified sauces became widely available. Supported by technologies refined during World War II food logistics, Clarence Birdseye's freezing innovations, scaled during the war from military supply, now allowed restaurants to store ingredients longer without refrigerated trucking expanded for Army provisioning, connected regional food processors to California's growing consumer base. Fast, repeatable meals were no longer just possible. They were commercially competitive, though not yet dominating the landscape. Early quick-service restaurants in San Bernardino, Los Angeles, and the Central Valley were building on the same logic that allowed the United States to feed millions of troops overseas. They removed silverware, reduced plate washing, eliminated multi-course meals, and introduced disposable packaging. A 1948 feature in the Los Angeles Times described a new trend in which customers arrive, order, heat, and depart in a fraction of the customary dining period. The purpose mirrored wartime cafeteria goals. Maximize throughput. By the end of the decade, a silent transformation had taken place. Without planning, lobbying, or cultural intent, the United States was inventing a new eating system. It was not driven by chefs or cookbook authors, but by supply chain managers, military ration scientists, packaging engineers, and the economic habits of a nation recovering from global conflict. The hamburger, once a simple roadside meal, was becoming the central unit of a standardized food economy. And soon, one small California driven would refine the process so completely that it would reshape not only the state, but the entire world of dining. In 1948, in San Bernardino, California, Richard and Maurice McDonald introduced a restaurant model that would permanently transform American food commerce. Although the brothers had operated a traditional barbecue drive-in since it was their adoption of an industrial, simplified assembly system known as the Speedy Service System that marked a turning point. Food historians note that its structure strongly resembled the wartime mass-feeding strategies applied in aircraft factories, shipyards, and U.S. Army field kitchens. The McDonald's eliminated car hops, reduced their menu to hamburgers, fries, and beverages, and reconfigured their kitchen into a sequence of specialized stations. Customers received meals in seconds, not minutes, mirroring the efficiency that had defined wartime food production. This operational shift aligned with a post-war supply chain built during World War II and adapted for civilian use. Wartime investment had expanded the nation's freezing, canning, and refrigerated transportation capabilities, enabling ingredients to travel long distances without companies such as Bird's Eye, Armour, Swift, and General Foods held government contracts and large-scale processing facilities that could now serve a booming consumer market. Studies from the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1949 reported that Americans were purchasing unprecedented quantities of pre-processed and frozen products, an outcome linked directly to wartime research into preservation and calorie stability. Ground beef, regulated strictly during wartime rationing, became one of the most accessible post-war proteins due to cost, availability, and portion predictability. It was compatible with assembly line meal preparation and required fewer skilled cooks than pre-war restaurant menus. Potato processing also advanced. Dehydrated and frozen potato products allowed restaurants to serve uniform fries year. According to a 1950 agricultural bulletin, mechanization had reduced per-pound potato labor costs by more than half compared to 1939 levels, reinforcing the economic structure that fast-service restaurants depended on. In addition to ingredient logistics, the United States had built a national highway and trucking infrastructure during the war to support military mobilization and coastal defense. After 1945, that system supported civilian commerce and enabled the development of restaurants positioned along expanding travel corridors. Diners, drive-ins, and quick-service stands flourished in regions with high concentrations of veterans and war industry workers. Demand was driven, in part, by habits formed during years of rationing. Americans were now accustomed to meals that were rapid, calorie-efficient, and consistent. While McDonald's was not yet a national chain, the San Bernardino experiment demonstrated the commercial potential of post-war food standardization. Newspapers took interest. A 1949 San Bernardino Sun article described the new restaurant model as one that feeds the motorist in the time it takes to fill a gas tank. That framing captured the post-war American mindset. Time itself had become a commodity. The war had taught the nation to value speed, coordination, and uniformity, and McDonald's capitalized on those preferences. By 1951, more entrepreneurs across the West Coast were attempting to replicate the McDonald brothers' kitchen logic. Their innovations did not emerge from culinary invention alone, but from the economic and logistical systems forged during the greatest mobilization of food resources in U.S. history. What had begun as rationing, preservation research, and battlefield necessity was evolving into a new civilian expectation: food engineered for efficiency. By the early 1950s, the United States was entering a new geopolitical era. The Cold War, a period of military alertness and industrial competition. Although food rationing had ended in 1946, the wartime innovations that shaped the American diet did not disappear. Instead, they became embedded in the country's commercial infrastructure. The industrial food processing capacity developed for World War II supplied not only grocery shelves but also a network of quick-serve restaurants that depended on standardized ingredients and rapid preparation. According to a 1952 U.S. Department of Agriculture report, demand for frozen and prepackaged foods had nearly tripled since 1945, driven by changing consumer expectations forged during the war. This environment created the conditions for the expansion of franchising, an organizational model that mirrored the efficiency and systemization of wartime procurement. A key figure in this evolution was Ray Kroc, a former milkshake mixer salesman who first visited the McDonald Brothers' San Bernardino restaurant in 1954. Kroc recognized that their Speedy system could be replicated and standardized across multiple locations. Much like military provisioning had replicated field kitchens, the same logic that allowed the Quartermaster Corps to deliver uniform rations across continents could support a chain delivering identical meals across states. In 1955, the first McDonald's franchise under Kroc opened in Des Plaines, Illinois. Technological momentum accelerated this trend. Wartime research in dehydration, emulsification, and controlled freezing drove commercial food science innovations. Companies that had supplied the military General Foods, Hormel, Armour, and Swift expanded product lines to include pre-formed burger patties, frozen potatoes, emulsified sauces, and powdered milkshake blends. Clarence Birdseye's freezing technology, refined for military logistics, now supported a nationwide distribution system for perishable items. Refrigerated trucking fleets, developed to transport war supplies, adapted to serve commercial restaurant chains. A 1953, industry survey noted that standardized food components were increasingly critical for restaurant profit margins. Government policy reinforced these developments. Federal investments in defense highways later, formalized in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, commercial corridors ideal for roadside restaurants. These travel routes connected suburban expansion to automotive culture, encouraging the spread of drive-ins and drive-through establishments. Food consumption became inseparable from mobility. The economic model of fast food thrived on high customer turnover, a principle rooted in wartime cafeteria productivity studies that correlated meal speed with labor efficiency. American households also embraced processed food at unprecedented scale. The growth of two-income families, suburban commuting, and new domestic appliance technologies, especially freezers and electric refrigerators, supported a shift toward home meal shortcuts. Ads from the early 1950s promoted frozen dinners, canned meats, and instant desserts as modern, patriotic, and social. Researchers observed that consumers associated quick meals not with deprivation, as they had during rationing, but with progress and national strength in an era of global competition. By the mid-1950s, the accidental legacy of wartime food logistics had transformed into an intentional industry strategy. Franchising, infrastructure, and technology converged to create a commercial ecosystem that rewarded uniformity and scale. What had begun as emergency rationing had become a blueprint for an entirely new American marketplace, one that would soon expand beyond national borders. In the late 1950s, the United States witnessed a striking transformation. The language of wartime food discipline evolved into the language of convenience, modernity, and progress. Concepts once associated with rationing standardization, portion control, and time-saving food preparation were repackaged for a peacetime consumer economy. Advertisements across newspapers, magazines, and radio celebrated quick-serve meals and scientifically prepared foods, echoing the efficiency that had once fed millions of soldiers abroad. A 1957 Life magazine described frozen dinners as a triumph of American ingenuity, uniting factory precision with home dining. The emotional weight of wartime necessity had become a powerful marketing asset. The fast food industry seized this cultural opening. Companies drew direct inspiration from mass-feeding practices developed by the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, which emphasized reliability and uniform caloric output. Marketing campaigns reminded consumers that the same nation capable of sustaining troops across the globe could now streamline family meals. Advertisements used phrases such as "meals in minutes," "feed the whole family faster," and "modern food for modern living." The message was subtle but unmistakable. Wartime efficiency was not just patriotic, it was practical and desirable. Television accelerated the shift. By 1960, nearly 90% of American households owned a TV, and food companies poured resources into visual branding. Fast food restaurants advertised consistent portion sizes, clean dining environments, and recognizable menus. Children's programming introduced jingles and mascots, designed to reinforce emotional familiarity with specific products. Scholars of food history note that television became the mechanism through which wartime food science entered the American imagination, transforming technical military logic into family entertainment. The culture of eating was now shaped as much by screens as by kitchens. Corporate research departments expanded rapidly. Borrowing terminology from wartime laboratories, companies described new products as tested, fortified, or nutritionally engineered, echoing the language used in ration development. Food scientists, many of whom had worked on ration stability and dehydration technologies, now collaborated with marketing teams. By blending industrial chemistry with domestic aspiration, they introduced emulsified sauces, shelf-stable buns, and frozen patties optimized for identical cooking outcomes. This synergy created what market analysts called a repeatable flavor experience, a defining promise of fast food. Psychologically, postwar Americans were prepared for this shift. Rationing had normalized limited choice, and military logistics had proven that food could be both predictable and abundant when centrally organized. As suburban life expanded, the culture of routine, scheduling, and automotive dependence reinforced the appeal of meals that required little discipline. 1958, Federal Trade Commission survey showed that fast food consumers valued three qualities above all others: speed, consistency, and familiarity. These priorities mirrored the survival logic of wartime, but now operated in the service of leisure time rather than national emergency. By the end of the decade, the United States had completed an extraordinary cultural inversion. The philosophies that once governed military rations, uniformity, efficiency, and automation, had become the cornerstone of a commercial food empire. What had begun as a response to global conflict now reshaped family dinners, advertising, psychology, and the nation's economic identity. The next evolution would carry these ideas far beyond American borders, establishing not only a new industry but a new international symbol of U.S. culture. As the United States entered the 1960s, the wartime foundations of fast food were no longer confined to domestic life. The systems that had preserved, transported, and distributed rations across continents during World War II now enabled American companies to expand their food models beyond national borders. The global presence of U.S. military bases, Cold War troop deployments, and international aid programs created a network of logistical corridors through which American-style processed food began to circulate. Scholars note that food became a soft power tool, reinforcing U.S. cultural and economic influence in regions tied to American defense and trade policy. The Marshall Plan 1948 to 1952, primarily known for rebuilding European industry, also accelerated this culinary shift. The program encouraged modernization of agriculture, refrigeration, and food processing infrastructure across Western Europe. American firms were consulted on industrial meat preparation, canning, and freezing technologies refined during wartime ration research. A 1951 Economic Cooperation Administration report emphasized the importance of standardized food preservation techniques for reconstruction and trade stability. As European factories integrated these systems, American-style convenience foods gained foothold in consumer markets. U.S. corporations recognized these openings. By the mid-1960s, fast food companies began establishing restaurants or licensing their models abroad. In 1967, an American quick-service chain launched operations in Canada, followed by expansions into Europe and Asia. Their international supply chains relied on wartime innovations: refrigerated containers, standardized patties, dehydrated potato products, and emulsified sauces. The same logistical logic that once supplied field kitchens and troop ships now supplied commercial kitchens around the world. American military installations further accelerated the spread. Bases in Germany, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines served standardized meals influenced by Quartermaster Corps' ration planning. Commissaries and PX stores imported canned and frozen goods from U.S. suppliers. Familiar to service members and their families, local distributors soon partnered with these suppliers, integrating processed meats, frozen vegetables, and powdered beverages into regional markets. Researchers studying food globalization identify this period as the beginning of a transnational processed food economy. Media also played a critical role. Hollywood films, television shows, and advertising portrayed fast and convenient eating as part of the American lifestyle. Efficient, modern, and international audiences already exposed to American products through defense and reconstruction programs associated rapid service restaurants with technological progress. By the late 1970s, historians estimate that tens of thousands of quick-service outlets operated outside the United States, many replicating principles first developed for World War II: ration logistics, consistency, portability, and simplified labor demands. By extending a food system built in wartime, the United States created an influence more enduring than military presence or political treaties. What began as emergency subsistence became a global commercial template that shaped diets, supply chains, and cultural identities worldwide. The American fast food model, grounded in ration science and mass-scale processing, was no longer only an economic force. It had become a global symbol, export of industrial eating that would continue expanding into every region touched by U.S. trade, media, or military networks. By the late 20th century, the wartime principles that had once stabilized food supply, shelf life extension, and calorie efficiency were facing serious public health scrutiny. Researchers began connecting the rise of processed food consumption to increasing rates of heart disease, obesity, and diet-related illnesses in the United States. The National Institutes of Health noted that between 1960 and 1980, the percentage of Americans categorized as overweight grew significantly, coinciding with an expansion of calorie-dense, rapidly served meals. The original intention of wartime ration science was survival and mobility, not everyday civilian nutrition. Yet the legacy of those food engineering strategies had fully integrated itself into the national diet. Criticism intensified as medical data accumulated. A 1977 U.S. Senate report, known as the Dietary Goals for the United States, warned that Americans were consuming excessive amounts of fat, sugar, and salt ingredients widely used in processed and quick-service foods, originally designed for shelf stability and energy efficiency in military provisioning. The report urged the nation to reduce reliance on such foods, marking a shift from celebrating speed and abundance to questioning their costs. Once praised as symbols of modern innovation, industrial food methods were now examined as contributors to chronic disease. Historians and food scholars highlighted a profound irony. The systems that had helped win a global war were contributing to long-term health challenges on the home front. Wartime logistics favored ingredients that were cheap, durable, and uniform. These priorities shaped commercial food manufacturing, promoting refined grains, hydrogenated fats, preservatives, and flavor and fast food menus derived from this framework, popularized meals engineered for affordability and convenience rather than nutritional balance. Critics argued that industrial food processing had evolved faster than public understanding of its health implications. Public debate grew beyond nutrition and into questions of culture and identity. Social researchers observed that American eating habits had shifted from cooking-based food traditions to consumption patterns driven by portability and time efficiency. Analysts linked these changes to post-war suburbanization, automobile dependency, and the rise of two-income households, conditions that made fast-service meals attractive, even necessary, for many families. Yet this convenience came with trade-offs: less time spent preparing food together, reduced use of fresh ingredients, and a weakened connection to regional culinary heritage. By the 1990s and 2000s, documentaries, academic publications, and public campaigns intensified criticism of industrial food systems. Organizations promoted fresh produce, whole grains, and lower sodium intake, while some schools and municipalities implemented nutrition reforms. Fast food companies responded with menu adjustments, transparency initiatives, and ingredient Steel, the underlying structure uniform ingredients distributed through national supply chains, remained rooted in the logistical innovations of wartime rationing and post-war franchising. The United States had never deliberately chosen this transformation. It evolved from emergency measures created to sustain troops advancing across oceans. The intention was survival, not a permanent redesign of civilian eating. Yet by the end of the 20th century, the consequences were clear. The wartime logic that fed millions of soldiers had reshaped global diets, economies, and public health. What had begun as ration cards, canned meat, and packaged biscuits became a defining force in American life, setting the stage for a final question, one that history could not have anticipated, but the future would have to answer. When the United States implemented food rationing during World War II, no government planner, supply officer, or agricultural scientist imagined that they were laying the foundation for a global commercial food model. Their mission was immediate and urgent: to support millions of troops overseas and stabilize the home front in a time of crisis. Yet the systems they designed centralized control of ingredients, nutritional engineering, mass preservation, and nationwide distribution did not vanish when peace was declared. Instead, those innovations migrated into civilian commerce, shaping what would become not only an American economic powerhouse, but also a defining feature of international consumer culture. The new food economy that emerged after 1945 reflected wartime values: efficiency, predictability, and scalability. Fast service restaurants replicated the standardization of Quartermaster Corps' ration planning, while franchising adapted the logic of military provisioning to private enterprise. Interstate highways, fueled by defense priorities and later codified through the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, enabled chains to expand across regions and eventually across continents. Refrigerated logistics, perfected to transport perishable goods evolved into a supply network that sustained millions of restaurant customers daily. A model born of necessity became a blueprint for global growth. By the late 20th century, quick-service chains were operating in more than 100 countries, powered by technologies originally advanced through wartime research: freezing, dehydration, vacuum sealing, emulsification, and shelf-stable processing. Cultural historians observe that American-style fast food became associated with ideas of convenience, mobility, and modernity. The same patterns that once sustained fleets and field battalions now supported suburban families, international travelers, and urban workers. Wartime nutrition science had moved from the foxhole to the shopping mall, from ration tins to value meals. Yet the legacy is not solely economic or culinary. Public debates continue over the health, environmental impact, and cultural influence of industrial food. Advocates of reform argue that the wartime logic of maximizing calories per labor hour has contributed to chronic disease and resource strain. Others note that fast service efficiency has provided affordable meals and employment for millions worldwide. The legacy of World War II rationing is therefore a paradox. A system created to defend lives later produced systems that citizens must evaluate, regulate, and sometimes challenge for the sake of public health and sustainability. Despite its complexity, the historical through line is unmistakable. The emergency measures of 1942 ration books, point systems, canned meats, powdered ingredients, and standardized field rations served as the backbone for a global industry that today influences agriculture, logistics, labor, advertising, and international trade. It is a reminder that wars reshape societies not only through diplomacy and territory, but also through what nations eat and how food is produced. As the 21st century continues, historians and policymakers reflect on a lesson that reaches far beyond the dinner table. Systems built in crises rarely disappear when the crisis ends. They adapt, accelerate, and embed themselves into daily life. The world's fast food culture is more than a commercial phenomenon. It is the unintentional legacy of a wartime effort to feed a nation and its army. Born from urgency, it became permanence proof that the consequences of global conflict can persist long after the last ration card is stamped.